Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Crime Time with Connie. I am obviously Connie, and hello. If you are new here, I sit down every week and I talk about a true crime case. If that interests you, please hit the subscribe button. That way you can see my videos. So, today's case, we are going to talk about a man who has been exonerated for a crime he did not commit. He spent over 20 years in prison for murdering his wife, but thanks to DNA, it proves otherwise. Nowadays, we see a lot of people being exonerated for crimes they did not commit. The Innocence Project has helped many get out of prison, and I think that is amazing. So for today's case, we are going to talk about the exoneration of Micheal Morton. Like I said, Micheal Morton went to prison for over 20 years for a crime he did not commit, and that was the crime of murdering his wife. His wife was born Christine Marie Kirkpatrick, and she went by Chris. She was born April 18th, 1955 in Houston, Texas. Chris grew up in the south of Houston. She would attend Catholic high school where she was very popular, and she was a member of the drill team. A lot of Chris's friends would say that she was very smart. She had a good head on her shoulders, and she was very outspoken. In 1976, she would attend the Stephen F. Austin College in Texas, and that's where she met her future husband, Micheal. She met Micheal Morton in psychology class, and they clicked instantly. In fact, they later went on their first date that night. Micheal was known to be very nice and very handsome, and Chris confided into a friend that she thought Micheal was the one. Micheal Morton was born on August 12, 1954 in Texas. His father worked for an oil field service company, which made the family move from Texas to Cali to back to Texas. And then he would later go to the Stephen F. Austin College, and he met Chris. In 1977, Micheal would actually drop out of college, and he was hoping to transfer to the University of Texas, and Chris followed. But unfortunately, the university would not accept their credits, would not transfer their credits over. This led Micheal getting a job at a supermarket, and he would stock the shelves at night to make money. He would later climb the ladder and become manager. In 1979, Micheal and Chris were officially married, and they would actually go to Disneyland or Disney World for their honeymoon. Many of their friends said that Micheal and Chris's love was very passionate. In fact, some of their friends would get very uncomfortable when Micheal and Chris would fight because they would bicker hardcore. They argued a lot, but it would end up in them both laughing and going to the bedroom afterwards. So, very passionate. Micheal would later say that Chris had a laugh that would just make him laugh, and her laugh would just be contagious, and her head would go back, and she just had a very, very big laugh, and he loved that about her. Sadly, in 1981, the couple suffered their first miscarriage, and this took a toll on Chris. She was very upset. She wanted to start a family, and losing a baby is very hard. But in 1983, Chris would have their son Eric, and that was a huge blessing for the family. But Eric was actually born with a heart condition that would later need him to have heart surgery. In order to get that surgery, he would have to be at least 30 pounds or 3 years of age. In 1985, the family moved to their house on Hazelhurst Drive in Austin, Texas. On August 12, 1986, the family Chris, Eric, and Micheal would celebrate Michael's 32nd birthday. And this day was a day Micheal would never forget. The family went out to dinner, but beforehand he said he was holding hands with Eric, and the other hand Chris held, and they were just walking with their son heading to dinner, and he thought to himself, this is it. This is what life's about. And sadly, that all came crumbling down the next day. After Michael's birthday dinner, they went home. They tucked in Eric for bedtime. Obviously, when you're married and it's your birthday, you might be expecting something. You know what I'm saying? Michael thought that he would get lucky that night, but Chris fell asleep, and this upset Michael. But he went to bed, and he woke up in the middle of the night to Chris coming to bed, kissing him on the cheek and saying tomorrow night, inferring that he's just gonna have to wait a little while. So 5 a.m. comes around and Michael gets up for work. He takes a shower, he shaves his face, he gets clothes for the workday, he says his goodbyes, and he leaves for work. He clocks in around 6 a.m., stays at work until 2 o'clock. After that, he goes to the mall to do some, I'm assuming, some birthday shopping. At 2:30, he heads to Eric's babysitter to pick him up, but when he gets there, the babysitter says Eric did not show up today. In fact, she hasn't even heard from Christine. And Michael thought this was very, very odd because Chris never told him that Eric wasn't going to daycare for the day. So he asked to use the phone, and that's when he calls his residence. But instead of Chris answering, it was the sheriff. And he said he needed to get home now. The sheriff that Michael actually talks to is a sheriff maybe some of you might be familiar with. His name is Jim Batwell. And Jim Batwell was the sheriff who kind of fed information to the serial killer Henry Lee Lucas, the man that confessed to over, I believe, 600 murders. Most of them, if not all of them, he did not commit. When Mike gets home, the sheriff tells him that his son is okay, but Chris is not. Chris was found dead in their bed. It seemed like she was shot, but she was actually bludgeoned to death. That's how bad her head trauma was. The neighbor found Chris's body after she saw Eric wandering around outside. Chris was found with a suitcase on top of her body along with a wicker-type basket. The place seemed a little bit out of order. There was no forced entry anywhere. The sliding glass door in the family's home was unlocked. Chris's purse seemed to have been missing, and her engagement ring and wedding ring were lying on the nightstand. Later, it would be discovered that Mike's firearm, a pistol, was missing. Michael wanted to see Chris's body, but the police refused. They said, absolutely not. You cannot see your wife's body like this. From the start of the investigation, Michael was the person of interest. That is because when police were investigating the home, they found a note to Chris from Michael. This note stated that Michael was upset with his wife, that he did not receive the love that night for his birthday. So to police, this seemed like that was motive enough for him to kill his wife. But he is not arrested yet. Later, on August 14th, 1986, just one day after Chris's body was found, her brother John decided to take investigating into his own hands. He tried to see if he could follow the killer's footsteps and see where the killer went after the crime was committed. During this, he found a blue bandana about 100 yards away from the family's home. On this bandana was blood. He would carefully put this into a baggie, I believe it was a plastic bag, and he would hand it over to the Williamson County deputies. On August 15th, Jewel Box, a store in San Antonio, reported that someone tried to use Chris's credit card. On August 24th, Rita Kirkpatrick, who is Chris's mother, tells the investigators that her grandson witnessed the crime. She told Don Woods, the lead investigator, Eric saw everything. He told his grandmother that a monster with a big mustache and red gloves hurt his mommy, and this man was not his daddy. Micheal also reports that Eric told him the same thing while he was cleaning the shower. He asked his daddy why the monster who hurt mommy was in the shower with all of his clothes on. Neighbors would also report seeing a green van in the area that they have never seen before, and he was walking in the woods behind the homes. The blue bandana that was found was actually found near where the green van was parked. Now, hearing this green van triggered me. It made me think of the Springfield 3, but this is in Texas. That was in a different state. Just anytime I hear a green van, I just think of those 3 women that just disappeared out of nowhere. I did cover that case if you go a few videos back, but that case still keeps me up at night. I also want to say that the lead investigator, Don Woods, was new to being a homicide detective. He had only been in this position for about 7 months. Before that, he was part of the police team, and he was actually a truck driver beforehand. He did not have a lot of experience in the homicide detective area, and this was a huge case for him to investigate. You see all the evidence I pointed out, you would think Micheal would not be a suspect. That note he left for his wife was nothing compared to finding a blood-stained bandana. Eric, the little boy, saw a monster who hurt his mom that was not his dad. Chris's purse was missing, and someone was fraudulently using her credit card. Also, that neighbors saw a man in a green van parked near the crime scene, walking in the woods. But no, they still had their eyes on Micheal. There was also 15 fingerprints lifted from the sliding glass door that did not belong to anybody in the Morton family. There was also 1 fingerprint lifted off the suitcase that was found on Chris's body that did not match anybody in the family. During Chris's autopsy, it showed that she was not sexually assaulted. However, her nightgown was lifted up, meaning that the crime was not sexually motivated, but most likely rage. However, in any case where someone does not have semen inside of them, that does not mean they were not sexually assaulted. The act of hurting someone could have made this person, you know what I'm saying? Anyways, Chris was found to have taken 8 blows to her head, and that is what caused the head trauma. It seems like a club or a wooden object is what was the weapon. The medical examiner based Chris's time of death between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. He based off of food digested in Chris's stomach. This would be the nail on the coffin for Micheal because he was the only one home and capable of murdering his wife during this time. Mike was cooperative with the police. He let them search his car, the house. He took 2 polygraph tests and passed. We all know polygraphs are not admissible in court. He let the cops search him. He had no scratch marks. Mike even talked to the detectives without a lawyer present. He thought to himself, I'm innocent. If I just tell the truth, everything will be okay. He knows for a fact that he did not murder his wife. But on September 25th, Micheal was arrested for his wife's murder. 2 days later, on September 27th, a $20 check that was meant for Eric was canceled when the user found out that Chris had passed away. Like I said, the money was supposed to be used for Eric because back in June he had his heart surgery that he needed in order to live. Mike and Chris had to go to Houston for this surgery, and they stayed there for about 3 weeks so Eric could recover. After Mike is arrested, he gets out on bail and he stays in the family's home. Many people found this strange, mainly because his wife was murdered there. Why would you want to stay there? But people grieve in different ways, and this is his home. People also found it odd that Micheal cut marigolds that Chris had planted. They thought, why would he do this? While he was out on bail, of course, lawyers, everybody's getting ready for the trial. On February 6, 1987, a judge ordered Ken Anderson, the district attorney at the time, to provide all of Wood's investigation reports to determine if anything he had in that file would prove Micheal's innocence. The judge seals off this file, meaning that he had found nothing exculpatory. Eric's eyewitness account, the green van, the forged check, the credit card usage were all absent from this file. Pretty much all the evidence that could prove Micheal's innocence were not included in this. You see, the judge ordered Ken Anderson to hand over all of the reports he had because Micheal's defense team felt strongly that since Ken Anderson was not going to call Woods to the stand, that they were hiding something, that they suspected that they could be hiding exculpatory evidence, which definitely makes sense. At the trial, the medical examiner takes the stand to say what he found. He said Chris must have died around 1 a.m. based on the food contents found in her stomach. He would later testify, years later, that his findings were not based on scientific statements, meaning that how he estimated this was not based on any facts, based on a scientific method. A state serologist testified in favor of the prosecution, stating that the semen found on the couple's bed was consistent with ejaculation and not intercourse, meaning that Micheal allegedly ejaculated on his wife after he murdered her. The district attorney went as far as to show the adult video Micheal put on before bedtime that night. Yes, when Micheal came home from his birthday celebration to set the mood, he put on an adult video, and the prosecution showed it to the jury. Just 2 minutes. They were allowed 2 minutes. And of course, the jury were disgusted. How could someone watch this? As in the prosecution, tried to paint Micheal as a sexual deviant. Micheal's defense argues that an intruder must have came in when Micheal left for work. Now the prosecution said Micheal killed his wife because she refused to have sex with him for his birthday, and that made Micheal furious. Micheal must have taken a blunt object, beaten his wife, left a note as if his wife were still alive. Micheal allegedly tried to stage a burglary, which he was not good at because he only pulled out 4 dresser drawers. He did all of this to cover his tracks. Prosecution said Micheal must have taken Chris's purse, his handgun, and the murder weapon and disposed of it before showing up for work. Now, I'm going to read you the note that Micheal left for his wife. Quote, "Chris, I know you didn't mean to, but you made me feel really unwanted last night. After a good meal, we came home, you binged on the rest of the cookies, then, with your nightgown around your waist, and while I was rubbing your hands and arms, you farted and... Sorry, it's not funny. You farted and fell asleep. I'm not mad or expecting a big production. I just wanted you to know how I feel without us getting into another fight about sex. Just think how you might have felt if you were left hanging on your birthday." So it seems like to me Micheal was pretty upset that Nothing happened that night. But this still doesn't prove that Micheal murdered his wife. The defense couldn't answer the question of who they thought murdered Chris. I mean, they didn't have any suspects. What they could give the jury was the unidentified fingerprints, the unlocked sliding glass door. There was a footprint found in the backyard. This all to suggest that an intruder came in. On the fifth day of the trial, Micheal did take the stand, but we know in all cases that when you take the stand, sometimes it's not the best idea. On February 17, 1987, Micheal was found guilty of murdering his wife, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Now, obviously, prison is not the best place to be. Micheal said that he would keep his head down and kept to himself. He did, however, make some friends. He spent most of his time working out and reading. He even took some classes during this time. He did get supervisions with his son Eric. Micheal said every time Eric would visit that he could tell Eric was growing up, but sadly growing away from him. On March 22nd, 1990, testing that was approved to have the bed sheets tested for DNA on it. But the bed sheets revealed that it was Micheal's semen, and this did not obviously help. Like, of course his semen is on the bed sheets. It's his bed sheets. Mike always thought he was in good shape. You know, he worked out a lot. But in 1999, he moved to the Ramsey unit. They worked outside a lot. They worked in the hot Texas day outside doing labor all day. And as you know, Texas in August is hot. And this prison was not built for ventilation. There was no AC, and there's hundreds of men together. He said the smell he would never forget. By the time Eric was 18, he told his dad that he was going to be adopted by Micheal's sister-in-law and that he wanted to legally change his last name. This, for Micheal, is what broke him. You see, when Micheal first came to prison, a man told him that Micheal needs to hang on to something in order for him not to unalive himself. He told Micheal, whatever you have left, look forward to it. Most men look forward to their wives, but he told Micheal to hang on to his son, that one day you'll get out and you'll finally be with your son. But when Eric told him that he wanted pretty much nothing to do with him, Micheal felt like he had no hope left, that there was nothing left for him. One night after going to bed, he put on his headphones, listened to music, and he cried out to God. And that's when he saw a golden light, a pure moment of bliss, and he knew God was talking to him. That for him was hope, that he could keep going. In 2002, the Innocence Project got involved with Micheal's case and a pro bono lawyer. In 2005, they filed a motion requesting additional DNA to be tested. The court did grant permission to test some of the items from the crime scene to be tested, but not others. Again, for the bed sheets, they could not exclude Micheal. On January 8th, 2010, Micheal's team successfully appealed the denial of testing on the bandana and the hair from the bandana in the Court of Appeals. On June 30th, 2011, DNA testing on the bandana had revealed that it contained Chris's blood and hair, and it also contained DNA from an unknown male, not Micheal. They would run this profile through CODIS, and ding, 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 they found its match. This matched a man named Mark Allen Norwood, and he was a convicted felon from California. He also had charges from Texas, all over. They also found out that he was living in Texas around the time Chris had died. This finally proves Micheal's innocence. And if you're thinking to yourself, why didn't they test the DNA quicker? Well, you see, sadly, Chris was killed in the 80s, and around that time, DNA was unfamiliar. They were working on it, you know? So it became very popular in the late 90s for DNA testing. So that's why you see nowadays a lot of people being exonerated for crimes they did not commit, because when they were sent to prison, it was in the 80s, 70s, 60s, and DNA was not a thing back then to prove innocence. His attorneys filed a Public Information Act request and finally obtained the other document showing Micheal's innocence, and the state filed that had been withheld at his trial. So that file that didn't include all that information, well, they finally got it. And when you go to trial, you have to show what you got. You got to show everything, because that just might prove someone's innocence. On October 4th, 2011, Micheal was released from prison, and he was officially exonerated on December 19th, 2011. The day he left prison, you can just see, there's a picture of him, you could just see him feeling the sun on his face. His mother, Pat, was by his side, along with his father, Bill. The real killer of his wife was a man, like I said, named Mark Allen Norwood. He was arrested with Chris's murder on November 9, 2011. In November 2012, he was charged with the murder of a woman named Deborah Masters Baker. Yep, you see, when they ran the DNA, they also got a match for an unsolved cold case. This murder would have never have happened if Chris's investigation was done properly. About 11 months after Micheal's conviction, Deborah was sadly murdered. Deborah was found dead in her home in Austin. Like Christine's case, Deborah was found beaten to death in her bed, suffering at least 6 blows to the head. There were pillows placed on top of her body. The authorities looked at her estranged husband because they were separated at the time, but he was ruled out as a suspect. Deborah was alone that day because her husband had the kids. The police did not have any other leads in the investigation, and sadly, her case went cold. The man responsible for Chris's and Deborah's murder, he dropped out of Austin's Crockett High School in 11th grade to join the Air Force, from which he was honorably discharged in 1974. By 1980, Norwood was married and living with his first wife and their daughter in Nashville. He would go on and commit crimes like burglary and assault with the intent to murder. At the time of Chris's murder, he lived about 12 miles from the Morton's North Austin home. Divorce records showed that when Norwood divorced his wife, he kept a 1974 Chevrolet van. And wouldn't you know, maybe this was the van neighbors saw parked near the Morton's home that day. And the handgun that Micheal Morton owned was recovered in Tennessee from a man named Sonny, who he worked with Norwood several years earlier. We got the van, we got the gun, they got the man. Norwood would be sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Christine Morton and Deborah Masters Baker. Micheal Morton would be awarded about $2 million in state compensation. In April 2013, a judge found that the former district attorney who prosecuted Micheal should face criminal contempt and tampering charges for failing to turn over evidence. The evidence that could have proved Michael's innocence. Ken Anderson was sentenced to 10 days in jail, but he only served 5 for good behavior. Micheal served over 20 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. And this man got only 10 days, but only served 5 for good behavior. By 2020, he remains the only prosecutor, past or present, who has ever spent time in jail for misconduct that led to a wrongful conviction. Micheal today has a good relationship with his son Eric. He is now remarried. If you want any more information about Micheal, he does have a website. But that is the case. That is the exoneration of Micheal Morton, a man who went to prison for a crime he did not commit. He was in prison for over 20 years. This case is sad. It's very sad. Not only did a little boy witness his mother being murdered, he lost his mom, he lost his dad for a little bit, not a little bit, or 20 years. Another woman was murdered because the wrong man was in jail. She had kids, and they do not have a mother anymore. That is it for today. I hope to see you guys soon. Stay safe out there and stay golden.